Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Cain. And as always, I feel like this daily was a bit difficult to navigate. I wouldn't call it like hard or maybe even easy. It definitely wasn't an easy run, but there were some hurdles that you have to overcome, like for example boss rush, and if you manage to get through those, then I feel like the run is gonna be pretty straightforward. And to some extent, I do understand where people were struggling on this one, but I did kind of make a very rabid play in some regard that was very aggressive on boss rush, and I feel like it did pay off in this particular instance. But I can see just because of how much damage I've took, it could have been easily the wrong choice. And sometimes you just have to make these decisions, which I'm not really sure if they're gonna pay out in the end, but hopefully they will. And in this case, I think it did. And before I get to that particular part, I feel like I want to focus on the very first treasure room. And it had a number 1 in it. And the number 1 is obviously a great item. It increases your DPS to practically the soft cap of your tiers, and our damage is unaffected, and maybe the only other downside, or the only downside that this item has, is that it decreases your range. I'm not sure if it's like by a half or maybe a set amount, but if you're a character like Cain, it basically reduces your range to non-existence, and now it's very hard to actually aim at enemies. We have to be up close and personal, and in some regard, when you're playing a character that has more range than Cain, that's not that big of a deal. Like, I would say always pick up number 1, because the DPS upgrade is definitely worth the range decrease, and you can generally kind of go close to enemies to deal damage to them. Obviously, there are some problems if you try to get to boss rush and hush and things like that, because those just bosses are just in general much harder if you don't have a lot of range. But against normal enemies, I would say that this is a great upgrade and benefit, because the DPS upgrade is really gonna make the rooms go by faster. So with that in mind, of course, because we are Cain, our range is already lower than any other character, so picking this up makes it, well, even lower in that regard. So the thing we have to kind of be aware of when we pick up number 1 is that we might not get any range upgrades for the rest of the game. So you kind of have to consider, is picking up the range upgrade, the tier upgrade in this situation worth it? Because if I don't get any other range upgrades that are gonna kind of help me throughout the run, will I be comfortable enough with this particular loadout to kind of take on those harder objectives? And I feel like this is a question and answer that really depends on the person who's playing the game. If you're the kind of player who maybe plays a lot of Azazel, then maybe you're used to fighting harsh in very, I would say, range unworthy scenarios. So maybe this is a good proposition for you. And in some other regards, I can also understand people saying, I don't really want to pick this up. Even though it's a DPS upgrade, it would kind of help me go a bit faster, but I feel like because of this, I'm not going to be able to deal with harsh. Then of course, in that sense, you wouldn't pick it up. And I feel like there's no wrong decision here. And obviously, objectively speaking, if you know how to play with less range, it's going to be the beneficial option for you. But if you can't control it, like if you're really bad against harsh in that particular instance, then of course, don't pick it up. Like, it's not worth dying to just have a little bit more DPS to go through the rooms faster. But luckily in that regard, the game was actually pretty nice to us, because we got Blood Clot, and later on we also got the Torn Photo. And Torn Photo, of course, is a tiers upgrade, which we don't really need, but it's also a shot speed upgrade. And every shot speed upgrade also increases your effective range, which also makes it kind of like a range upgrade. It's not as influential or I would say big as a regular range upgrade, but it definitely helps out, and it allows us to stay just a little bit more safe against some of those harder enemies. And Blood Clot, well, it maybe seem like it's not that good, because essentially what it does is there's a 50% chance that your shot will go further. At least it gives us an option to fight those enemies which we have to be kind of a bit further back, and we really can go up close and personal. And because of that, I would say that Blood Clot is not a good item, but it definitely is something that just helps us keep a bit safe. Like, we don't have to rely on it. Obviously, we can still just get in there. We're gonna have the benefit of having some of our shots just deal a little bit more damage, but also if you feel like we're in a danger, we can just stay back and just rely on those 50% chance shots to actually deal with our enemies. And I feel like just having that secondary option there is pretty much what made this item worth it. So I was mentioning at the start that boss rush in this one was extremely difficult, and I would say the part of that was just due to the room layout. Like, there are a lot of rocks, so you don't have a lot of space to move, but obviously there are also spikes in the corners, so you kind of have to watch out for that. The second variation is it's a champion boss rush, so that's also pretty dumb. But the third one is some of the waves that spawned in were just extremely hard. Like, they jump around, teleport a lot, so it's hard to kind of predict where they're going. And the fact we're at only 4.2 damage, which is our base damage, by the way, with only Blood Clot as their basically any DPS upgrade other than number 1, of course, puts us in a very difficult spot. And for that exact reason, because I figured I want to do boss rush, I have the stars card, I want to get in there, so I decided to buy the red candle. And red candle was actually extremely good here, because we also had the 9 volt, which actually reduces the charge time that you have on your red candle, which means you can shoot it much more frequently. And sometimes I just kind of shoot them in random directions, expecting enemies to kind of jump around, and it proved to be, I would say, it was definitely the right choice in this one. And I felt like because I had to go a bit faster, because we had the sacrificial dagger that also helped us out in that regard, so I was able to kind of get close and personal. If I ever felt like maybe I need a bit more oomph, I can just use my sacrificial dagger to actually deal that last bit of damage. And besides that, of course, we also had, what's it called, the Jacob's ladder, wait, it is Jacob's ladder, and because of penetrative shots, every time we shoot at an enemy, we also produce lasers, and of course that deals damage to enemies, and that's usually a pretty good deal, because it does help us kind of maintain our DPS. So even if you don't have a lot of DPS upgrades in the terms of damage and tears, at least we're doing a little bit more damage, and we have some AoE because of our penetrative shots and Jacob's ladder. So it did turn out to be, I would say, easier than expected, but it definitely was very hard. And as a result, because I was so careless, I tried to really get a lot of damage done, I took a lot of damage. And that's what I was saying before, that maybe in some cases this would not be a good deal, because even if maybe I did take all of those risks, even if I took so much damage penalty, in the end, I still might not be fast enough in order to get to Harsh. And obviously in that case, every damage I take on boss rush is just gonna be lost points, and I don't necessarily want to do that. I just actually want to get in there and just have as much score as possible. And if I keep throwing them away in the terms of just taking dumb damage because I try to do damage with sacrificial dagger, then that's not gonna be a good deal, obviously. But luckily, we did get to the end, we did beat boss rush, I was able to teleport out and take the D1, and the D1 makes a reappearance here. And not too long ago, I had a daily where I didn't pick it up because I was like, who needs the D1, right? You can't really do anything with it. But it turned out if I had the D1 in that particular daily, it would have been very good, because it would have allowed me to break the game. And in this one, it made the reappearance, and I was like, well, in this one, I'll try to kind of honor its presence, and I'll try to use it to try to do something. And it was definitely, I would say, the catalyst for me to really kind of pop off when I actually get to the Void. And I'll explain everything when we actually get to that point. But needless to say, it was the item that kind of helped us break the game. In some sense, we got a Forget Me Now. We were able to get a lot of Shrek bonus. And the way I actually got Shrek bonus in this one is quite unusual, and not something like anything you've seen previously. And I feel like, because first of all, this circumstance never came up, but also I wasn't really sure if it worked, so I never tried it. But now that I've tried it, actually I do know what's going on. So we're fighting Harsh here, and Harsh is obviously a bit of a meanie here. Our range luckily isn't that bad anymore, because we also did get some range upgrades later on, and of course with the Blood Clot and of course the shot speed upgrades, it's not that horrible. And with the 2020, we're also dealing quite a significant amount of damage. The biggest part here is that we have a lot of AoE potential, so as soon as he starts spawning some of the little guys, we can pretty much take them out instantly. So you can see that I'm kind of going through the motions here. I did spawn one of the pedestals in the secret room, and I used some of the purple runes that I've got to use them. I mean, I duplicated them with the D1, and then I re-rolled them, and eventually, of course, I got a Forget Me Now. I cleared the rest of the floor, and then I used the Forget Me Now to do the whole void again. And maybe the more interesting part is, you might be asking, how did you break the swag? And there was a little clip there which I showed it, but I didn't really comment it at the time. But essentially what you're doing is, you just spawn a bunch of battery charges in a room. And the way I did it is, essentially, as I just kind of went through the floor naturally, there were a lot of sags, because I had Sag Boy and the sack of sags and things like that, and there were just a lot of battery charges in the ground. So I picked up those battery charges, and I went into one room which only had a battery charge in it. So I just started duplicating those battery charges up. And essentially what I was doing, I was transferring the battery charges from other rooms in just one room. And you may be saying, well, why would you do that? Because it's not like you can duplicate them, you don't have a rune or anything like that. And you're precisely right. But what ends up happening is, every time you pick up a battery charge, you get like something like 5 points. And you can see where this is going. And if you have the D1, you can pick up a battery charge, you can use the D1 again, and because the room is just full of battery charges, you're gonna get another battery charge in return. So you can kind of keep doing that, much like with the jar and just any regular heart, and that way you're just gonna kind of stock up on points, and you're gonna actually be able to break that way. And this is something I wasn't really sure if it worked, but when I actually got like 30 battery charges in a room, and I just started spamming the spacebar button, I noticed that it was not only a good strategy, but was actually pretty fruitful. Like, the breaking wasn't as tedious. I mean, it did take me 20 minutes, but it wasn't what I would call hard to do. It's like a very monotonous task, and you just basically press the spacebar button. And because there's so many battery charges, or at least because there were so many potential to get a battery charge, I didn't feel like I was struggling to maybe go through the room and find those hearts, because that can be quite annoying. Like, if you have the jar and you try to break with just the hearts, because there are a very limited amount of hearts on any floor, you kind of have to struggle in order to pick them up and of course drop them down back again. But with the D1, it was just, I would say, a little bit easier, not significant significantly so, but it definitely did kind of help us out to acquire our goal. So in this one, we did the void twice. I didn't get the clicker, but also I think that would have been possible if I did spend a bit more time, or maybe if I got a blank card with the purchase run or something like that. And in the end, we did finish the run in a pretty comfortable spot on the 8th place with basically, like I said, double void. We broke the Shrek cap, and we also were pretty good in the item department. I feel like the item penalty is relatively high, but we didn't pick up that many items through the course of the run. We got a lot of, I would say, items which paid for themselves, so like things like sack of sacks or the sack head and things like that. Obviously those are all items which kind of give us more in the terms of Shrek bonus, so even if it's maybe costs 100 points to pick up one, each of those items is gonna give us like something like 3,000 points in return, so it's a very wise investment in order to pick it up. Our damage penalty was very high, but that, just like I said, it was because our run was difficult in some regard, but also the boss rush were kind of heinous, but all in all, it was a very enjoyable run. I did enjoy it for what it's worth, and I feel like it's one of those where if you did get through boss rush, then you're gonna have a good time, and of course if you don't really gonna get through boss rush, maybe if it kills you, if it deals too much damage, you might feel a little bit discouraged, and because of that you might miss Hush, and then of course because you miss Hush, you miss the void, and all of those things kind of just stack on top of each other, and you maybe end in a position where you really don't want to be in the end, and that's, you know, a bit of a bummer, but I feel like for me personally it was an enjoyable run. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.